I just finished having an absolutely fantastic discussion with Austin Pancner of The Functional Musician, talking all about how we can play in a healthy way that feels good and is tension-free. And I answered some of the questions that the QuickStart Clarinet community has sent in as well. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you. And without further ado, let me jump into the fantastic discussion that we just had so you all can get benefit from it. And also don't forget that you can look in the description for timestamps because there's a really long discussion that was fantastic. But if you want to skip to some specific sections, you can either see that in the description or look for the little chapters in the play bar to jump to exactly what you're looking for to get out of this. But I think you're all going to enjoy it. So many good nuggets of wisdom that Austin shared, and I'm so excited that I get to be sharing it with you now. Great. So I'm so happy to be here with Austin Pancner and the founder of The Functional Musician. I'm really excited to sort of have a true expert here to talk about some playing with pain and how to play pain-free and have a long career as a musician. This is something that I've actually considered doing a video on in the past. So when you sent me a message on LinkedIn and I saw that there was somebody who actually really knows what they're talking about with this stuff, it was an awesome opportunity to have you on. So thank you so much for being here. And I sort of want to just start off with just a general overview of sort of your backstory. How did you get into this stuff and sort of what is the functional musician all about?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Josh, I have to say thanks for hosting me and thanks for bringing me on. It's a pleasure to be here, and hopefully, I can provide some type of value to you and your students and other people who are listening to this as well. And I don't really consider myself an expert as I'm constantly growing my knowledge base, but it's very humbling. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. So, just a little bit about my backstory, and I'll try to be as concise as possible because I can really expand on it and get into the details if you'd like. But basically, I'm finishing up my doctorate at IU. I've been in school my entire life. I mean, like right out of high school, I was in my undergrad, went to my master's, did a performance diploma, and then pursued a doctorate with about a semester in there of a break between my performance diploma and your doctorate. But if you've been in your school your whole life, like semester is really not that much of a break, especially when you go into a full-time job. And I was teaching a full load too. So anyway, sometime in between my master's and my performance diploma, I was a tenor trombone player. I switched to bass trombone. And for the clarinetists who are unfamiliar with that switch, it's just like an added extra, pound and a half to 3 pounds, depending on your instrument make and your model. But that 3 pounds for me, um, you know, really, really set me up for some struggles because a month into my performance diploma, I was playing in like three different ensembles. I was playing in a chamber group. I was preparing for auditions and a recital. So it wasn't abnormal for me to be practicing like 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. And especially like, when you get to your weekend, you're like, oh my gosh, like I don't have this full-time job. I don't have all of these ensembles. Like this is my time to practice everything I missed. So I wasn't really resting on the weekends either. And I was listening to my body, but at the same time, because I was practicing so much, all of these bad habits that I accumulated all the way from high school caught up with me. And this is, like 6 to 8 years of just detrimental, debilitating habits. And it accumulated into me blowing out my forearm. And this started this 3-year injury cycle that was very, very hard to get out of. And, along the way, I was trying a lot of different things. I tried Alexander technique, Feldenkrais, physical therapy. I tried a lot of other different exercise modalities. And granted, like I did take a lot away from them, but these things still kept happening. And I ended up re-injuring my shoulders. I injured my back. I got to a point where a week before a recital, where ironically, I was actually the most prepared. I was running through my recital 1 to 2 times a day. I was playing, I felt really, really great. And then all of a sudden, the week leading up, every time I took a breath, it was just like someone was stabbing me in the chest. Like that last 20% breath, I couldn't take. And as you can imagine, it was very frustrating for me as a performer. And when I went to my recital, it did not go well. And I actually ended up failing. So enter this huge debilitating mental cycle on top of the physical demands that were placed upon my body throughout the time. It was really, really hard. And it got to the point where, honestly, Josh, like I thought I was just going to quit music. I thought I was going to go do something else. I've always loved animals. I was looking at biology. I was looking at movement. I was looking at kinesiology. And what I ultimately ended up settling on was gaining certifications in personal training, corrective exercise, nutrition, and a couple of other things, just as kind of like a side career path. Because I've always been interested in health and wellness, and I've always been interested in nutrition and taking care of the body and stuff. Again, ironically, I got injured. Um, and it got to the point where I was like, cool, well, I'm just going to start applying these concepts to myself. And I actually started making a lot of improvements and a lot of progress. And I'm like, cool, I might be onto something. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And the doctorate kept me busy, but basically all the energy and all the time I spent away from my doctorate, I spent on my certifications and going to the gym and experimenting with my body. And it got to the point where I was actually able to practice without any pain. And I'm like, whoa, this is cool. And then I started making more improvements on that. And fast forward a year later, I was actually able to perform a recital without any tension or pain. So I'm like, cool, I'm definitely onto something. I think I'm on the right track. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And then fast forward to that later year, which was almost a year ago in like the end of January. It's almost been 3 years. But basically, I was able to perform my second recital, my chamber recital, without any tension or pain. And at that point, I was like, I know I have something special. I figured something out. I don't know what was going on. I haven't really done anything new, Josh. The only thing I really did was approach my injury rehabilitation from a sports science perspective and manipulate it a little bit for the musician in mind, me being the musician. So these aren't new concepts. These aren't anything that I've invented per se. However, it is important to bridge that gap between sports science and musician health and wellness because, as awesome as it is to squat 300 pounds, I don't really need to do that to be able to be a functioning musician. Now, it is cool and it does have its benefits, but anyway, so that kind of brought me to this. And Indiana University has something called the OECD office, the Office of Entrepreneurship and Career Development. And I went to them kind of with my story before, like at the beginning of my injury when I was considering switching career paths, and they helped grow these seeds of thoughts and ideas into something really special. And earlier last year in 2020, I entered the innovation competition and I entered a couple of other pitch competition for businesses, and I ended up being very successful in those endeavors. And as a result, I got the funding to launch this. And when I launched, I didn't realize how much work there is to do in musician health and wellness because it's something that really, number one, isn't talked about that often. Number two, when it is talked about, there are also a lot of teachers and there are a lot of people who aren't aware of the broad scope of musician health and wellness. So I saw this as an opportunity. So I ended up launching back in May. And since May, we've helped change a lot of musicians' lives and make a lot of these transformations that have been very debilitating for their lives. So, all in all, like we do help people perform without pain, but we also help people get over the mental hurdles, the physical hurdles, and just experiment and explore and find what works for their body. Because every rehabilitation is going to be different. Everybody's journey is going to be different, and finding what really resonates with someone can go a really, really long way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of what you were doing for that rehabilitation process, like actual exercises or stretching or modified practice routines? Like, what are you actually doing to make it so that you can hit that goal of playing without pain?
Yeah, so that is a more complicated answer or a complicated question, but I'll try to do my best here. So it was really about exploring my body, exploring movements. And, I had this, I had rounded shoulders where your shoulders are hunching forward, your neck comes forward and down. And over time, that's just going to keep bringing everything down with gravity naturally. And I had to train my body to naturally correct itself. I had to train my shoulders to go back into an aligned position, my spine to go back to neutral. And what I do is I do a lot of pulling exercises. I do a lot of shoulder exercises. And what it really came down to, though, was finding a way, number one, exploring my body, developing body awareness to the point where, like, I recognized the faulty movement patterns that I had. For example, when you're in rounded shoulders, you actually are putting a lot of stress on your shoulder area. They don't have as much room to move, where if they were in their functional state of down and back and aligned with your neutral spine. So, for example, if you just try to round your shoulders and move your arm above your head, you're only going to get to a certain point where your body literally limits you. And just finding those breaking points and realizing what my body was doing and how my body was moving, I was able to just kind of rebuild that foundation. And it went back to rebuilding that foundation. I mean, it came to the point where I was at this cornerstone of the road where it was like, well, I just failed my first doctoral recital. Like, number one, failure is going through my mind. But number two, I was like, cool. I also had a little lip injury going on. And I decided to take 2 months off the horn. And during that 2 months, that's when I really started to rebuild my body. And, it had strength training, it had mobility, it had self myofascial release. I was looking at my nutrition, I was looking at just taking a step back and just looking at my health and wellness, like from the big picture, and making sure that even if I don't become a trombonist, these things don't hinder my life no matter what I do. And, looking to when I'm 60, 70, 80, 90, or 100, crossing my fingers, I wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing now supported my life then. And if we think about it, we often don't think about that as musicians because, we don't like to think in the long term. We don't like to think 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. But if we start doing that and approach things that build these sustainable, healthy habits and integrate them into our life, when we're down the road, we're not going to be forced to stop playing if we want to or don't want to. We can play as long as we want. We can be the Jade Freeman, who's the principal trombonist of Chicago Symphony Orchestra, who is also, he has aged very, very well and is still playing at a high level in that orchestra. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. I don't know how long he's been in that orchestra. I think it's been like 50 something years, maybe it's 40, but his entire career has been based there, and he's taking care of his health. And he is reaping the benefits and reaping the rewards, and it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's great. What would you recommend for like somebody just getting started into this? Like, are there any good books or good programs? Obviously, you'd be a great person to go to, I think. But yeah, how do you get started in this? I feel like there's so many different aspects between the exercises and strength training and all that nutrition stuff. How does one get into that and start taking care of their body?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And, just a little warning out there. It's like we live in the world where everything's going online now. Information is so easily accessible. I can literally grab my phone and have more information at my hands than there was available to us 30 years ago when this wasn't a thing. So with that said, and especially with COVID, with trainers going online, the saturation of information is so incredibly high. And this goes down to finding credible sources, incredible information that can actually be applied to your life. Because often the hardest step is just information overload. Like how do we approach it? Like where do we go? Like there's literally millions of things out there, and it can just be so hard to find what to do. But if I were to give like 3 steps, and this is 3 steps that I always check in with potential clients just to make sure they're on the same, on the same wavelength. Is you want to be looking at your sleep. Are you taking care of your sleep? Are you showing up for yourself every night and making sure that's very high quality? And if it's not high quality, are you working towards making that high quality? Because if you think about it, sleep is the number one important health and wellness habit that you need. Because if you literally don't sleep, you're going to die. And that's like an extreme version, but the more you sacrifice your sleep and the lower quality that is, that can literally affect everything from your mental health, your physical health, your performance, how you show up as your best self, if you get as cranky as easily, or whether you're focused and just like enjoying life. I mean, it literally has a ripple effect on your entire life. So if you're someone who's just starting out, tracking your sleep and making sure that's high quality and listening to your body is going to go a long way. And along those lines, looking at your hydration. Do you actually drink enough water in the day? I mean, just looking at my desk, I have a cup of water here. I got a bottle of water here. I have one on the floor. My girlfriend goes a little crazy with me because she's like, "Oh, you got water bottles everywhere." But it's the only way I can really like make sure I stay hydrated. Because if you're dehydrated, number one, that's going to affect your sleep. Number two, that's also going to affect your performance, especially if you're someone who, as a clarinetist, relies on the dexterity and the nimbleness of your joints. If you're dehydrated, even if it's just 2%, your body's going to work harder doing daily activities. And when you're in a high stressful performance situation, which a lot of us haven't been in since COVID, but when we go back to that, that's something where if you're dehydrated 2%, even if you're in a high stress performance situation, that's going to elevate the symptoms that you experience. So instead of feeling dehydrated 2%, it's going to probably feel like 20% or 30%. And your body's going to work even that much harder. And if you're playing more extended passages like clarinetists do, I'm a trombonist, I play whole notes for a living. So I can't really relate. But, going like this for 20, 30, 45 minutes, and your body's working harder, that's definitely going to affect your endurance in one way or another, which is going to affect your musical products that you deliver to your audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also affects your energy level, just the ability to stay focused in a practice session, the ability to stay focused in a performance situation. But anyway, so that's the second thing. And the third thing I would say is nutrition, just making sure you're eating foods that support energy, support recovery, and also just support your daily life. I'm not saying sugar's bad. I'm not saying fat's bad. I'm not saying um, processed food is bad, but we do want to avoid these things in excess. Because if you have excess sugar, that's going to result in sugar crashes. And if you're having a couple of cookies before your practice session, 30 minutes into your practice session, there's going to be a point where you're like, oh, I'm just tired. And if you notice that feeling of just, oh, my shoulders are rounded, my head's coming forward, my posture is not neutral and aligned, that's definitely going to translate into your practice session and make the later half of your practice session feel a little bit more like you're working a little harder. And maybe you're going to leave that practice session rather than feeling motivated like you got a lot of work done, feeling like just a little bit down on yourself, which can be hard to separate those emotions. And we can talk about that later. Um, but just from those three things, even the fat, just having excess amounts of trans fat and saturated fat, when you're 50 or 60, even 40, if you have red meat 4 to 5 times a week, that greatly increases your chance of heart disease and stroke. And when you're 50, if you have a heart attack and you're in a professional orchestra, you're playing in a chamber group, or you're just freelancing and doing what you love, you're going to have to take some huge significant time off to recover, if you're able to recover back to your full strength that you once were. So I'm just looking at, that one's really in the future. I love hamburgers. I love a good steak. I love cookies. I love a good like mint chocolate chip ice cream, but everything in moderation is really, really key. And I'm not saying avoid those things, definitely not. But I do say they play a role in how you show up for yourself every day and how much energy, both from a physical standpoint and mental standpoint, that's going to have, and how that can affect your life. So just to sum up everything I just blurted out in like the last 5 minutes, you have this health and wellness triangle of sleep, hydration, and nutrition. And if you're going to start anywhere, if you focus on those three things are going to create one of those pillars that helps lift you up and support you for the rest of your life. We don't need to do 20, 30 different things at once, but if you can really integrate and master these fundamentals, such as your long tones, aka sleep, scales, aka hydration, and arpeggios, aka nutrition, that's all going to come in effect and really support you in a positive way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I just want for everybody listening, I did not pay him to use a triangle reference. In like all of my stuff, I talk about triangles. I have like a how to play clarinet triangle, a how to play music triangle. I like to think of everything in sort of that like
Oh, nice.
three-step foundation.
Yeah, there's something about the number three that's really, really powerful. And it's really also easy to remember.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I also want to add a point about nutrition too. I think it's good to be thinking about sort of the quality that you're putting in, but I think a lot of times when people get caught up in that, they tend to think about all the stuff that they're trying to avoid, and then sometimes end up actually avoiding eating in general too. So, and it's good to like keep that fuel going. I had a colleague at Northwestern who would always say like if he didn't eat enough, he felt like he didn't have enough air support, which I never really understood that myself, maybe because I was always eating enough. But definitely if you're like hungry, it makes it so much harder to play well and have all of that good stuff going too.
Yeah, can I add on that?
Hmm.
I 100% agree. And I am the exact same way. I do not practice hungry because I just, as a bass trombonist, I am like, I need as much air as I can in a relaxed way. And if I'm even just like, just a little bit hungry, that's definitely going to affect my mindset. I'm someone who gets hangry as well. I'm wondering if your friend does too,
Hmm.
especially in a practice session. So That's really, really interesting. And I love that you said, listen to your body. If you're hungry, eat. It's not about restricting yourself and avoiding the things, but rather than think about like, oh, I got to avoid this, I got to avoid this. What if you thought about it like, oh, this is going to give me more energy. This is going to give me more focus. This is going to give my body vitamins and nutrients. I had a friend who is into bodybuilding, and he hated cottage cheese, but his trainer wanted him to eat cottage cheese. And every time he ate it, he's like, I hate it, but you know what? It's what my body needs. It's going to give my body nutrients, and I'm going to show it for myself and do it. And by golly, man, like he ate cottage cheese every day for like 6 months. It was absolutely amazing. And just that simple idea of rather than avoiding something, but replacing it with something that actually supports you is a mindset shift that's really beneficial for your health and wellness, but also your practicing. Like, oh, I shouldn't articulate this way. Rather than thinking about what you shouldn't do, what if you thought about it like, oh, I want to articulate this note in a legato sense so I can really drive through the phrase here rather than thinking about the don'ts. Because you can really only focus on one thing at a time. And both of these mindsets, one doesn't support your growth and one does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really, really great point. I want to get into now some more specific questions that people sent in about specific pains and things like that, and see if you have any advice for things that they can be doing to start fixing some of these specific things. So the first one, again, I'm not really sure if you have too much experience with this, but a lot of the people in my audience are a little bit older and really struggling with arthritis. And I'm not sure if you have just any general arthritis advice.
Yeah, I really don't. I usually leave the arthritis to the doctors and the medical specialists. So if you're someone out there who is going through arthritis, I have two recommendations. Number one, see your doctor. See a doctor that actually specializes in arthritis. And number two, I would actually see a nutritionist because nutrition can play a huge role in preventing a lot of the symptoms of arthritis. And I'm not a clinical nutritionist, so I can't really give any advice, and I nor do I want to, but I just want to encourage you guys to go out there and have that conversation with them because they are going to be able to provide you a lot more credible information than I am. And you know, just kind of looking over some Google searches, it seems like the clinical nutritionist is a really good place to start. And if that's something that doesn't turn out to be, going to that doctor who also specializes in arthritis and having that conversation with him and having this open dialogue can just really, really be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I want to get into now some like specific areas of the clarinet that are
Sure.
always an issue. The first one I
Hmm.
want to start with is actually the right thumb. This is just a notorious issue because pretty much we hold all of the weight of the instrument with our one right thumb, and there's not very much good leverage because it's usually pretty much all of the weight of the instrument at like the tip of that one thumb. So I don't know if you have any advice on like hand position things to be thinking about or specific exercises for like strengthening the thumb or the joints or arm positions or anything like that that can help with supporting the weight of the clarinet.
Yeah, sure. So let's see if I can make a triangle reference out of this because I love triangles too. So, there's a lot of things we want to consider. Number one, we do want to make sure that when we're playing clarinet or any instrument, or even just sitting at a desk, that our body is aligned. And by aligned, I don't mean super, super straight, because if you think about sitting super, super straight, your back actually goes into extension. You can feel your muscles working all the way from your lower back, middle back, and upper back. But by align, it means your lower back is neutral and you have this natural curvature and you feel really relaxed. You shouldn't really feel like anything's working except for your core at like a 2 out of 10. And that is completely natural. We do not want to relax that because that actually supports a lot of our upper body and provides us a lot of stability. But we do want this stable, aligned body to support holding up the clarinet. Granted, the clarinet isn't that heavy. However, so that would be point number one. Point number two would be how you're actually holding it. Is your scapula down and back? We actually want to be able to hold the clarinet as relaxed as possible. And doing so, you want to come from this stable, aligned base. Because if you're relying on your hand, if you're putting all the weight on your hand and your thumb, eventually down the road, depending on how much you practice, because all of that weight is on your thumb, that is creating tension. And it doesn't matter if it's 1 out of 10 tension with your hand, that is going to build up. And eventually down the road, that's going to go to a 2 out of 10, a 3 out of 10, a 5 out of 10, eventually until it's like, crap, I can't hold up the clarinet anymore. So with that said, a couple of wrist things. We have flexion, and we have extension. You can also move your hand inward and you can move your hand outward. And with that, it creates a 360. Now, if you're in flexion, so the right hand, if you're in flexion, if you like hold your hand out and just try to wiggle your fingers, you can feel the tension just radiate through your forearms, like absolutely just radiate. Same thing when it's in flexion. Sorry, wait, extension, flexion. There we go. So
Yeah.
flexion is the same thing. When you try to move your fingers like this, you feel a lot of tension just radiating through your forearms. So you actually want to find a middle ground with between flexion and extension. Same thing when going left to right. If you're all the way to the left, going inward, and you're moving your fingers, you can feel tension radiating on the bottom of your forearm. Same thing when you go to the right. And you often see pianists who play like that too, and that places a ton of stress on the forearms. So just finding that balance where your hand, if you're just like relaxing your hands and you just put them to your sides and then you bring them up, that position right there, your hands are at the most natural state. And oftentimes what I do when working with other instrumentalists, especially trombonists, I'm like, okay, just relax your hands and then bring them up. And you'll notice how your hands want to curl and they also want to stay in this neutral position that's in between that 360-degree angle I was talking about, in between adduction, abduction, flexion, and extension. So you with me so far?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So when you're holding, when all of that weight is on the thumb, the same thing can apply to our joints. Going flexion and going all the way through extension, and even to the point where you're like popping out your joint a little bit if you're double jointed. So finding a way where it's in its most natural state and can support the weight of the clarinet will go a long way. For example, like if I just relax it, shake it out, and bring it up, my thumb wants to naturally just sit there. Now, can you just try that with your right hand, like relaxing and then bringing it up and then resting your clarinet on that thumb?
Hmm. This is actually the same exercise that I do with all of my students. So this is
Mm.
good.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So you just have that natural, I guess my wrist is not natural, but just keeping
Well,
it
if you go
really
like this, it's
relaxed.
a little, yeah. If you
Yeah.
go like that, it's going to droop down a little bit. But if you
Hmm.
bring it up like this to the right, it'll
Yeah.
naturally want to support itself.
And then you can bring the clarinet in front of that. And luckily the clarinet is ergonomic enough that you end up getting your fingers more or less in front of the holes, and can have that natural shape. Yeah.
Yeah, and just checking in with your hand position, checking in with what your thumb is doing, ever so often, if this is something that is a problem and you're trying to improve it or integrate some more healthy ergonomic playing or holding, checking in with this every 10, 15 minutes, setting an alarm on your phone in your practice session can go a huge way, because when you can, our mind can really truly only focus on one thing at a time. And you really got to check in with yourself when you're building new habits, like all the time. And with that said, you think you could be doing something and you could be doing something completely different. Just like if you're recording and listening back, you think you're expressing enough, you think you're making those dynamic shifts or those very delicate articulations. And then you listen back and you're like, oh my gosh, it sounds like Thor's hammer in the battle of, Ragnarok or whatever it is. It's like, it's crazy. So the same thing applies here. And along those lines, practicing with a mirror is such a great way to do this, because you can just practice, you can listen to the music and you'll be like, hand position. Oh, what is that? Oh, my hand's actually doing this when I'm playing, and creating a lot of tension, which is translating into the technical issues that I'm having on the instrument or something else. That's just one example. But, it all comes down to just finding something that's really comfortable and relaxed, and something that's very ergonomic, something that you could literally sit here all day doing without having to worry about that tension or pain creeping in. So long-winded answer again, but the last thing I would say, Josh, is if you have like, let's see if my girlfriend left one of these here. She has these little grippy things that are just really, really nice. But basically, like if you have any type of foam, like foam's really, really squishy, and that can provide an extra layer of support for your thumb. If the clarinet is really heavy or it feels uncomfortable, you're starting to develop that callus and you don't want it. Just placing some type of soft little like quarter of an inch foam thing in between you and the insertion of the clarinet can also just provide your thumb a little bit more comfortability when you're holding your instrument for long periods of time.
Yeah, definitely. There's all kinds of thumb rest and like thumb grip products out there. One of my favorite is actually just pencil grips work really well. You just stick it on your thumb rest
Yes,
and then
that's
clip
exactly
them
what I
off.
was looking for.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. The pencil grips.
yeah,
I call them
exactly.
grippy things, but pencil grips is probably the more better term to use.
Yeah. That's great though. And that's like exactly what I always talk about is just keep all of this really natural. Any kind of tension can cause issues and build up over time. There were some questions about the right thumb and some questions about the left thumb. And I think the answer is pretty much the same. Just keep it all natural. A couple just like clarinet specific pointers to that. You might be surprised at where your thumb ends up when you do this sort of just relax exercise and bringing your hand to it. It's kind of hard to get this on the video the right way, but you can see my thumb's more actually at an angle in the natural position. A lot of times people will think like, oh, the thumb should be like totally perpendicular to the clarinet. And then they try to contort their fingers to get in that position. And
Yeah.
that's where you start to get some weird tension. So don't think about any specific way it should be approaching the instrument. Think about a natural hand and then put that to the instrument. Same,
Yeah.
yeah, same goes for the left thumb as well. Sometimes people will feel like they need to press the register key with like the tip of their thumb, but actually, again, it's more of that natural angle. And I end up pressing the register key much more with the side of my thumb and just finding a position where it's really easy and natural.
Yeah, and Josh, that is so important here. Just find something that's easy and natural, because if you're easy and natural and you'll have more control, you'll have more flexibility, more dexterity, and just more endurance with your hands. You'll be able to go through the keys a lot easier. And for those of you that are watching, just backwards, rewind 15, 20 seconds to where Josh was demonstrating that and just look at his hand position. And if you try to replicate that, that's going to bring a lot of the replicate the hand position when you were showing what not to do. That just going in that position is going to replicate a lot of tension and just show you how easily that can creep up, even with the thumb just coming out. Putting all of that support in a place with your thumb where it's in a compromised position, it's not, or a position where it's not its strongest natural state, that's going to bring tension down the road. Even if that tension's just a little bit, that tension does build and build and build. So bravo, Josh. It's funny how we're just both on the same page with that, and we haven't had this conversation before. So it's just really cool to see.
Yeah, it's good. It feels good to know that what I've been teaching is good and not the wrong thing. uh, Great. Some other like specific pain issues have to do with a lot for me personally, I get this a bit where it's sort of the shoulder neck area. Again, I think that it sort of stems from the weight of the clarinet being on this right arm. It also could be some like embouchure things. Sometimes my jaw gets a little sore as well because the clarinet embouchure does have to be quite strong in the jaw. And I think of like a nice forward jaw position, which is maybe something that's actually not natural, but I think important for playing the clarinet well. So maybe that could be just a general thing to talk about. Any of this neck, jaw stuff, and things on the instrument where we kind of do have to do unnatural things.
Yeah, sure. So just a disclaimer for the tension and pain. It's really about coming down and finding the root cause, whatever is causing that. And in my experience with working with a lot of different musicians from all different walks of life and all different instruments, there's never just one root problem. So, what I say, take it with a grain of salt and just consider that it's only going to be a part of the equation. And it could be one of those things where I'm like, oh, it could be this, and it's not that. And you'll have to go to other things. So, but with that said, I think it's really interesting. You talk about jawward forward positioning or thinking about this. Oh, because as a brass player, I think about that as too. I have these 4 different corners in my jaw, especially with bass tromboning. You go into the low register to avoid chewing with your articulation. You really gotta move your jaw forward. And the longer I practice, like this area definitely gets sore, just like a muscle. And I don't know if that's what you're talking about, or you're talking about more of these muscles back here. Which ones are you talking about?
For
You
me
talking more embouchure
personally,
related, or are you talking back here where the jaw connects?
it's more back in the jaw and like where the jaw sort of connects to the skull.
Yeah, so I kind of struggle with the same thing. So I don't know if I have a real good answer for you other than just awareness and checking in with yourself throughout the day, especially after those practice sessions where you start to notice that. Because I notice when I check in with myself, especially when I do meditations or body scans, or just to like, kind of go like that to relax before a practice session, you can hold a lot of tension back here. You can actually be, just not grinding, like putting pressure between your teeth, like biting down just a little bit. Um, and it's like something where you're not aware of it, So I would just check in with that ever so often. Also massaging this. I know there's like some resources out there. Face Charger. It was meant for like a brass player's it's like a brass player's massage for your face after you're playing, and it like goes through a lot of different massages to um, go through the major musculars of this area. I don't know if it's still a thing because this was back in like 2016, but it's a great resource that I think is probably still on YouTube. Again, Face Charger. And if not, just like massaging your face like this, going under warm water. I know Dale Clevenger back at IU, he's like, oh yeah, every morning before I go to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, I would go and take a shower and I would just massage my cheeks. I would massage those muscles because he's getting those muscles warm. And if you get a muscle warm, it can be more pliable and more flexible, which results in your embouchure being more pliable and flexible as well. I don't know if that'll be applicable to clarinet playing, but definitely something that is worth a shot. Definitely something that's worth experimenting. So for the shoulder neck area, um, I would again check in with their posture. You know, these things are happening for a reason. And if they're happening 45 minutes into your practice session, if you haven't been practicing in front of a mirror, I would definitely start integrating that and see just what you notice. Because oftentimes, like even for me, tendency with my mic, I hold the entire weight of the instrument with my left shoulder, my back, and my left arm. And my tendency, especially in like Instagram videos and stuff, I'll notice when I go to do content recording after I'm done practicing, if I'm not careful, this will start to creep in. My shoulder will raise just a little bit, just a little bit. And I have to really be diligent and relax those muscles behind there when I do work them. Because if they don't, if I do this and I walk around with my shoulder just elevated by like that half inch at the end of the day, I have to really work hard, number one, to get that back down. But number two, that's when tension, pain, and just that level of discomfort in my breath in my daily life really comes into play. So, if you're experiencing that, check in with your posture. Chances are your head might be going forward a little bit, your shoulders might be rounding a little bit, and just going back to that aligned neutral spine, your shoulders down and back naturally, not of course pulling back, and just being aware of how you're presenting your body can go a very, very long way. I'm sorry. That's I think that would probably be step one. If you're finding that, Josh, you are aligned, you're checking in with yourself all the time and nothing seems out of place, then this is a conversation, of course, I'm also willing to have again, like a follow-up, just to throw some different ideas at you. But practicing in front of a mirror just to see if anything wonky is going on, I think can go a very long way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. I think another thing that sort of goes along those same lines, and actually it's very relevant to the video that I released last week, which had to do with articulation and trying to make the motion of the tongue independent. It's this idea
Mm,
of independence of everything, because we do have to use our embouchures to actually make sound, and there are muscles that are doing work there, but trying not to let the work that's happening in your embouchures muscles translate to your shoulder muscles or your back muscles. That was one question too, was more lower back pain, which may have something to do with breathing tension, or again, I think this posture stuff is exactly the right track and right thing to be thinking about with that. But
yeah,
not letting
yeah.
tension from your embouchure, or maybe tension's the wrong word, but strength from your embouchure translate to tension in other parts of your body.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually wrote this down. The idea of independence of everything. Same thing goes with trombone playing. Not that trombonists are going to be listening to this, but I mean, um, that's a really beautiful, beautiful concept. And I completely 100% agree with that. And I resonate with it in a lot of ways. I would love to go into the lower back pain if that's cool with you.
Hmm.
Yeah, so lower back pain is a billion-dollar industry. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. Like I think it was like 44 billion or something back in like 2017 or 18. And lower back pain happens for so many reasons. There's never one cause for lower back pain. But now that we're going to a more sedentary lifestyle, we're going on Zoom, we're sitting down for longer periods of time. They say sitting is the new cancer. And not that it's going to kill you, but it can cause a lot of tension and pain, especially sitting down for long periods of time. Now, for example, this is just one example, but basically, like, let's say we're like, cool, Josh, like, we're gonna bro out, we're gonna watch the new season of Cobra Kai all in one sitting. We're gonna sit down the entire time, 10 hours, let's just do it. And we're like, cool, let's go. I got my coffee. And then 10 hours later, we get up and we're like, oh, my lower back's killing me. And as you sit for longer periods of time, what happens is we run the risk of our glutes becoming deactivated. Not deactivated in the sense where they just stop working altogether. They're going to work a little bit, but not enough to be a prime mover and support your lower body as you're walking around. So if your glutes are not working anymore, your body is going to find a way to move around. It's going to find a way to compensate. And that compensation goes to the surrounding areas, aka the hamstrings lower and the lower back being above the glutes. Excuse me. And that often results in feeling really tight hamstrings. That's why people are like, oh, I've been sitting down for long periods of time. I got to stretch out my hamstrings. But that actually does not help in that situation. And on the other hand, your lower back is taking on a load that it's not designed to do. And as a result, you feel a lot of lower back pain. So if you're someone who is going through this lower back pain, if you've been sitting for extended periods of time, that's a huge sign that you need to activate your glutes. You can do some glute bridges, you can do some hip hinges, you can do other things to activate the glutes, and you can just go on YouTube and search that, and you can find so many different things. But oftentimes when we're sitting down, our glutes just become less and less activated, and as we start to walk around, our lower back's going to take on that role. So it does go back to posture. I'm a huge believer in posture and healthy movements. Are going to help you. And if you're moving faulty, if your posture is debilitating, that's going to catch up with you in one way or another. And there are other fitness professionals, Josh, just to be transparent, just like with music, that would disagree with me. From what I've seen, this is that has worked with me and my clients and other people as well. So it's definitely some food for thought. So if you do have that lower back pain, rather than thinking my lower back's broken, ask yourself, have I been sitting down for long periods of time? And if you have, go and activate some glutes. Find some glute activation exercises, and we can talk about this some more. But for example, the glute bridge or the hip hinge, and walk around and see if you notice a difference in how your body is responding to those types of things. And even if it doesn't get rid of your back pain 100%, if you've been sitting down for long periods of time, those stretches, those strengthening exercises, activation exercises, they feel like $1,000,000. They will, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I do want to get into something that I think is not posture related, although it may be, and I may be overlooking something. But I had one person write in talking about like lip pain and lip numbness, and you actually mentioned a little bit of a lip injury too. So, what do you have for working on like the lips and making those tension free?
Yeah. So I don't really talk about my limp injury that often, so I'm gonna get out of my comfort zone and be vulnerable with you, man. So I have a little bit of perfectionism in me. One of the biggest things that I have to work at in my health and wellness is my mental health. I mean, my perfectionism, my not thinking about the past, worrying about the past, being in the present, and just doing my best and showing up for myself every day. And with that said, I am an over practicer, man. Like I said, I was practicing 8 to 10 hours a day as a trombone player. Like, I'm no Christian Lindbergh, who is the first trombone soloist after, to really, really actually make a living as a trombone soloist. And as a result, I bruised my lip. And that bruise followed me throughout my graduate degree, because you can't really just take a month or 2 months off in your graduate degree. That's ludicrous with everything that's going on. But that followed me for a long time. And it stemmed from, number one, not taking enough breaks. Number two, not listening to what my chops were telling me. I mean, like, I'm at a point now where I practice 1 to 2 hours a day, and it's the most productive practice that I think I've ever had, because I'm just really efficient and I know what my lips can do now and I know not to push them. But it's one of those things where it's like awareness and the ability to just check in with yourself after an exercise, and kind of what's going on, and just keeping up with the signs can go a really long way. Because if your lips as you're playing are like, send some sharp pain, send some numbness, some tingling, the tingling is natural, but it's going to happen, that's writing that line where tissue's starting to break down. That's the blood flowing, the blood's flowing, it's getting it warm. And when you start to practice into that, just like if you were lifting weights, you're practicing into failure. And you do not want to practice into failure. You want to rest so your lips can recover. And your lips, you can push your lips to a point where it's like the recovery is pretty fast. I mean, like, I do take a day off every week just to keep my mind fresh. But if you were to push and practice into that failure, the slower the recovery is going to be. Maybe instead of 1 day, it's 2 to 3 days. And, if you're experiencing lip pain, it all comes back to how much are you practicing? When does that lip pain happen? How does that lip pain happen? And what are those symptoms? You have to take accountability for what's going on in your practice room. You can't rely on other people to help, uh, help you can't rely on other people to fix these things for you. You got to show up for yourself in your practice room and just become aware. And if you can write down these symptoms and start looking at this objectively, just like your recordings as well, you're going to be able to find that root cause, and start experimenting and figure out what's working for you. And of course, you can ice your chops. You can take ibuprofen. You can heat them. You can do other things. But of course, we don't really rely on those. Lips are very, very sensitive. And I don't know this for sure because I'm not a focal dystonia expert, and this is something that people are still studying. But just like if you break down a muscle in the gym, if you work your bicep every day, there's going to be a point of diminishing returns where that bicep will eventually stop working because you've broken it down so far that your body just can't recover. So, if you're experiencing that lip pain, just stop and ask yourself, why is this happening? How is this happening? And what can I do? What does my body need? What are the signs my body's telling me right now? Because if you can listen to those, I promise you, you're going to see some improvement, and you're going to start to figure out the real root cause of what's going on. And granted, if this is a neurological issue, seeing a neurologist, that can go a long way as well.
Yeah, yeah. I want to put a pin in the idea also of just taking breaks, not just like taking a day off each week, but also taking breaks within a practice session too. I've been finding for myself that's been something that's helped quite a bit, because before, when I would practice, I would maybe play for 30 to 45 minutes with pretty much the clarinet not leaving my mouth. And then I would stop and take the instrument out of my mouth, and I'd be like, I can't move my face. So it's been really good to like set a timer and have some of that intentionality to actually stop, pause, stretch, massage, relax things a little bit, because it does take muscles to play, but we want to make sure that we're giving those muscles a little bit of time to recover even as we're going, and not just, I liked that phrase that you used of like playing into failure.
Yeah. And this is something where if if you don't know, if you don't have that awareness, just starting practicing 5 minutes a day, like 3 different sessions, and just learning and experimenting and experiencing what that's like, and slowly increasing the practice time, you'll start to see the signs a little bit more clearly. And you'll be like, oh, my face feels weird after 10 minutes. What's going on? Oh, my face feels weird after 15 minutes. And building into that, that's a great way to also build success into your practicing if you want to rebuild and work on that awareness in a more integrated and creative way, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. I want to start wrapping up with just, what would be one exercise that you think would be really helpful for people to start incorporating? Like maybe you mentioned like meditation or body scans or anything like that that you would think like
Yeah.
anybody watching this could get benefit from doing like right now.
Yeah. Well, everybody's going to be different, and you got to be honest with yourself. Like, you know, how comfortable are you with your body? When you pick things up, do you feel like your back's going to break? Are you, do you feel like are you 25 and feel like you're an 80-year-old person? If that's the case, if I were to choose one physical exercise, it would be the hip hinge. Without any weight. The hip hinge is just like, I think, the most comprehensive exercise. If you can do the hip hinge correctly, because there are so many elements and you really master that exercise, that's going to go a long way. And I do that exercise every single day, no questions asked. I'll do some hip hinges after this before, I go and do some other things before some client calls. So I would definitely recommend looking at that. If you're not following the Functional Musician on Instagram, I post a mobility routine every Monday where I do post different routines for different situations. So definitely check that out. I know I incorporate hip hinges quite a bit in those. But if you're someone who struggles with the mental side of things, with self-confidence, with focus, with motivation, with trusting that everything is going to work out and trusting the process, daily meditation has been an absolute game changer for me. And as someone who struggles with the mental side of things as well, if I don't keep up with my meditation practice because it's so integrated, I notice right away and I can't stay focused. Can't stay grounded, and I start overthinking and get into this very detrimental thought cycle that can be really, really debilitating. So in those lines, like, you don't have to do an hour of meditation every day. Start with 5 minutes, even if it's the worst meditation in the world. Like, it's a skill, and you're not going to be Gandhi the first time you do it. You're not going to be able to just connect with your breath the first time you do it. But I promise you, even those crappy meditation practices are still beneficial, and your body still recognizes those and is still getting the benefits from that. So I would highly recommend meditation before you're practicing, and maybe at the end of the day too, if you're someone who often goes to bed and your mind just seems to go and go, and you just can't get those thoughts to settle down.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I will definitely make sure that there's a link to a video of doing the hip hinge in the description, since it's probably a little hard to demonstrate with like the camera setup or whatever right now. So I'll
Yeah,
make sure that
sure.
there's a video for everybody to check that out. And just one thing, just for my own selfish reasons, because I actually have just started doing meditation, and this has been like my third day of meditating.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Yeah, what advice would you have for like beginners, or like how does meditation work for you? Could you just give like a super quick crash course on that?
Yeah. So I'll do meditation every single morning. And I'll also do it when I feel overwhelmed, when I feel like I can't focus. For me, when I'm really overwhelmed, I can tell because I'll close my eyes and it'll feel like a million things are just going on. I can't actually like discover what those are. It just feels like my brain is swimming. And for me, it's all about connecting with your breath, just slowing down the heart rate, really, really centering. And it's like resetting your iPhone. Have you ever just like, if you have an iPhone or an Android, just like opened up and see how many apps you have open? I mean, like, I opened mine yesterday and I had to close like 35. And I'm like, no wonder my phone was slow. And it's like the same thing with our brain. You have all these thoughts going on and you're just swiping them up, swiping them up, swiping them up. And if you're a beginner, guided meditations are a great way to go, but really just experimenting and exploring. You have opportunity here to be really creative in how you approach this. And for me, like, guided meditations can be really, really good, but my most beneficial meditations have been just listening to really calming music and connecting with my own breath, connecting with my own self, and just letting me feel that breath in my body. Because if you connect with your breath, and I talk about this concept of connecting with your breath, and other people call it connect with your heart center. If you've ever listened to a guided meditation, or connect with your internal chakra, these are all the same concepts. You're trying to connect to that warm feeling in your chest, that feeling where like you are no longer in control of your breath, but you're with your breath and your breath is just happening normal. And once you connect to that, which I would argue is the hardest thing in meditation, you can really dive into that meditation practice and expand upon it and do an experiment with a lot of different things. I like, with my clients, I talk about it, it's like the door. Connecting with your breath is like that door. And once you open the door, you have just this world of different meditation practices that you can experiment with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but do you have any other advice or any other things that you'd like to share? And definitely, where should people go to learn more about you, and what can people get out of the functional musician?
Right. Yeah. Well, definitely go follow the underscore functional underscore musician on Instagram. That's primarily where I'm based and where I upload all my content. Upload content 6 out of 7 days a week. And I try to make it as beneficial to my audience as possible. I really try to add value to this community. And if you're someone who's experiencing tension, pain, or injury and you want some more support and help, you can always reach out to me on Instagram. Just DM me and say, hey, I saw this and I just wanted to connect. And I'm more than happy to continue that conversation and see how I can help. And I also have www.thefunctionalmusician.com if you want to check out that website as well. I have some blog articles on health and wellness, as well as some mindfulness and free mindfulness meditation resources that are available um, out there on the web. And other than that, I just want to encourage everybody. It's 2021. Things are looking up for the musician lifestyle, and it can be very discouraging around this time because there's not a lot of freelance opportunities. But just keep with it, trust the process, and keep playing music, because music is really what it's all about. And it's about connecting and connecting with yourself and really expressing yourself. So for all of you out there who are experiencing tension or pain, don't get discouraged. This is why I decided to get into this field, was to help people and encourage people to figure out a way to make this happen. And just continue to show up for yourself, continue to doing the work, and I promise it's going to pay off, and I promise you're going to come out the other side a changed person and growth as just a human and a musician. So that's pretty much all I have to say, man. This has been a fun conversation. It's been nice getting to know you and having this conversation. If you found this really valuable, feel free to just reach out to me and let me know.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here. And I love that idea of just keep going on your journey, whatever your unique journey may be, and just keep practicing and keep doing it, and you'll get there. It's a lot of little things over a long time really add up. So thank you so
Amen.
much, Austin, for being here. Definitely check out The Functional Musician. I'll have the website and the Instagram linked in the description of this video so that you can check that out for sure. But thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure, Josh. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, wasn't that fantastic? What I want you to do now is be sure to check out all of the functional musician stuff. Go to his website, go to his Instagram, make sure that you learn some of the things that he's sharing over there. I think there's lots more great exercises and great things to be checked out there. But I also want you to leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and something that you're actually going to do to put this into action to change your playing for the better, whether it's thinking about your posture, setting a timer while you're in the practice room to check in with your hand position or your posture, or just trying to take more breaks in your practicing, whatever it may be. Leave a comment with your key takeaways so that you can actually implement this and turn this into action and make a difference in your playing. If you enjoyed this, definitely reach out to Austin, either send him a DM on Instagram, or you can check out how to contact him through his website and just say a quick thank you. It always means so much to me, and I'm sure it means so much to him as well, to hear that the stuff that we're sharing is beneficial for all of you. So we would greatly appreciate that as well. Show him some love and support because he shared lots of great things. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.